Welcome to today's Manufacturing Engineering Media webinar. Our topic is Cloud ERP helps manufacturers keep up with the times. Hello, I'm Pat Wawrzyniak, Senior Editor at ME Media. My beat includes covering developments in CNC controls, automation, and manufacturing software, which happens to be the topic of our presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to provide some background on what we will be doing today. Our sponsor, Plex, is a leading developer of ERP software. Plex's flagship product, the Plex Manufacturing Cloud, offers shop floor to top floor solutions for the manufacturing enterprise. You will be able to ask questions during the presentation using the Q&A box that appears at the right side of the screen. Following the presentation, our presenters will answer your questions. If time runs out before we can get to all of the questions, we will make sure the answers are emailed to you. Portions of this webinar are pre-recorded. As often happens with viewing videos over the internet, the quality of the presentation can be affected by the type of internet connection you have, the total bandwidth available to you, and the number of people accessing that bandwidth at the time. If you experience difficulty, please let us know via the Q&A app. Also, if you have questions about any other aspects of our webinars, please email me at pwawrzyniak@sme.org. Cindy Jutras, our first presenter, is president of Mint Jutras LLC, with more than 35 years of experience in manufacturing and supply chain management. Cindy is a recognized expert in analyzing the impact of enterprise applications on business performance. Patrick Fetterman, our second presenter, is VP of Product Marketing for Plex and is responsible for all product marketing activities for the company. Patrick has more than 25 years of experience in technology marketing, including more than 10 years of experience in the software as a service market that is core to Plex Online. Now, here is Cindy Jutras.
Thanks, Pat, and welcome to all of you on the line. I'm happy to be here today. The times, they are certainly changing. In fact, you know, the pace of change has been accelerating so much lately. You think it couldn't get any faster, and then sure enough, it accelerates again. I was reminded of that fairly recently, probably 2 or 3 years ago. I was speaking at an executive forum. You know, it was interesting because in 2006, I became an industry analyst. Prior to that, I spent probably about 30-plus years working for software companies like ERP companies. And in the middle of that 30 years, I spent about 10 years in pre-sales. And during that time, I probably did a plant tour once a week or sometimes twice a week. And then I had about a 15-year hiatus, and I didn't set foot in a manufacturing plant for a while. And at this executive forum that I was speaking at, part of the forum was taking a plant tour of a Harley-Davidson plant in Milwaukee. And fantastic tour, by the way. I stepped foot in there, and the first question that came to mind was, where are all the people? Now, the people weren't not there because of, you know, business going offshore or there being a down cycle in their manufacturing. No, that plant was really humming, and a lot of product. It was all drives and transmissions coming out the door, and yet I looked around, and literally there were few, if any, people in sight at any point in time. Now, there were people there, though, but they weren't assemblers, they weren't machinists, they weren't your typical manufacturing worker. They were the decision makers. They were the knowledge workers. Yes, they were responsible for getting product out the door, but they weren't putting their hands on that product. So the reason there weren't people there wasn't because of offshoring or nearshoring or anything like that. It wasn't because business was down. It was because there was so much automation on that shop floor. So, it's just a changing dynamic. It changes the profile of the manufacturing worker, and it also means it places new demand on the solutions that support that production. There's a new competitive landscape involved. The world is shrinking. Yes, there are offshore and nearshore kind of activities that need to be worked into the whole scheme of things, which means the whole supply chain becomes more complex. It needs to become more collaborative. Now, it also means there's new markets. But what's interesting is where your competition is coming from is also changing. So those new markets that you used to go to for offshoring services and materials, though you went there because they were low-cost country sources. Now, that's where some of your competition is coming from. Originally, when this started to happen, it meant that you could still compete well because the quality coming out of those new areas really couldn't compete with you. But that's changed over time. So now you're not only competing on cost, you're also competing at the same level with quality. That means you need to seek new ways of differentiating yourself. You can't just compete on price, delivery, and quality anymore. You also have to perhaps seek new areas to differentiate yourself, like new innovation, perhaps adding services. So those points of differentiation are changing. At the same time, your customers are becoming more demanding in terms of price and quality, delivery, also on connectivity and collaboration. And the bottom line is you all need to do more with less. So how can the cloud play a role in facilitating this change? First of all, remember I mentioned that, there are workers out there, but the profile of those workers has changed, and they're the knowledge workers, the decision makers. In the past, those people that actually used ERP were the super users. They may be the heads down data entry people, the accounts payable clerks, the people doing three-way matching or moving inventory, etc. And the rest of the company communicated through reporting. That's changed. Now with the access anytime, anywhere is much more critical today, as we're all now on the move and we're all that much more connected. And this raises the bar in terms of expectation. There's less patience for waiting around for someone else to come back with an answer. So whereas in the past there might have been 20%, maybe 30% of employees that used ERP that actually put their hands on ERP, you notice that's changed. This data that you're seeing here and the data that you'll see is coming from our Mintutrus ERP Solution Study. This was the 2013 study, and this shows the difference between those that are running a SaaS, software as a service, ERP solution and all others. And quite frankly, that all other category is still the larger majority of ERP users today, mostly on-premise solutions. In this case, the all other, about 45% of employees actually use ERP. But in a SaaS environment, that number jumps up to 65%. And quite frankly, I also survey a lot of Plex customers, the host of our or the other participant in our webinar today. And at Plex customers, it's up to 75%. So that means there are that many more employees that are directly connected and therefore making decisions based on ERP. Also means that the executives need to have better direct access to the data that's in ERP. In years gone by, it was very unusual that a top-level executive ever actually put their hands on ERP. They always worked through someone else, a subordinate, a surrogate, etc. But in this case, the question that we asked of our audience was, what level of access do your top-level executives have to ERP? And as you can see, even in the all other category, 45% have access and regularly use ERP. That means that dark green box there, 45% are actually putting their hands on ERP in some way. That number jumps to 56% when you go to a SaaS environment, and quite frankly, it goes up even higher when it comes to a Plex environment. In fact, in 2013, that number was 65% for Plex, and we've just concluded data collection for our 2014 study, and that jumped all the way up to 77% for Plex users. So as you can see, we're reaching higher into the enterprise and providing that much more level of access to the data from which the decisions are made. What it means is that as you connect more employees, you actually need more functions because you're reaching into areas in the organization that have historically been underserved by ERP. Good example of that, topping the list is aftermarket services. This might be for repair, it might be on-site repair, depot repair, it may be materials management for repair services, etc. This might be one way that you're adding more differentiation in your market by providing these kinds of aftermarket services. Now, the way you read this slide, you'll see the 2013 column. That's the percentage that have adopted that solution as part of the ERP in 2013. The next column is 2011. Now, there wasn't a 2-year difference between when we collected the data. It was more like about 16 to 18 months. So it was the end of 2011 to actually the very beginning of 2013. And you can see the percentage increase. So it went from 47% to 80% from 2011 to 2013, and that's a 69% increase. As you can see, that's how this is sequenced, from what the biggest increase was to the smallest increase, but in each case, more and more manufacturers are taking advantage of this expanded footprint. So the next one down, enterprise asset management, if in fact you're relying more heavily on capital equipment, including automation, you can't just throw more bodies at a problem when you've got a scheduling issue anymore. That equipment needs to be running and running smoothly, so that may mean some more preventive or possibly some more remedial action taken to do more with less. The distribution requirements planning. Now, a lot of manufacturers have also done distribution, but this increase could be a sign of more disintermediation. It could also be an indication where you have expanding into new markets and new geographies. Can't just send a truck someplace else if you're short on materials in one location versus another. The supply chain planning must be reflective of more complexity, more collaboration for supplier collaboration and scheduling. Finite scheduling is more the norm now. You can't just do all your planning assuming infinite capacity anymore. And then the remainder of these, from project management to master production scheduling, and you can see all the others. These aren't necessarily new functions, but it's indicative that manufacturers are taking better advantage of more advanced functionality and more advanced capabilities. Now, one of the things that you may be thinking, if I need to compete on a grander scale, but I'm limited in terms of the functionality that I have today, or maybe I'm limited by some legacy architecture that prevents you from collaborating, from connecting all the time, from the heightened visibility that's required. If that's the case, then there's a good chance that you may need to make a change. You may need to either re-implement to a newer version of what you have, or more likely you need to go to a new solution. But you may be thinking, that's going to cost me money. Can I really afford it? Well, in this case, cloud really plays a key role here because it makes it easier to pay for. You can do more with less cash, and it also introduced the possibility of paying for it or accounting for the cost as an operating expense versus a capital expense. So, even for those that are capital constrained, you may be able to make a move and not have to sacrifice any of the functionality or your needs in order to be able to afford it. So one of the questions that I've been asking in ERP surveys for a long time now has been, what if you were going to purchase an ERP solution today, regardless of what you have today, which deployment options would you actually consider? When I started asking this question back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007, the percentage that would actually consider an alternative deployment like software as a service was very low. It was down around between 10 and 20%, and that's grown. And probably around 2009 or so, sort of after the big hit in terms of the economic crisis, that's when we saw a big jump, and it's leveled out to a certain extent. Just around 50% would actually consider software as a service. About the same percentage would consider ERP hosted and managed by their ERP vendor. Now, the reason I point that out is I will tell you that there's still a lot of confusion around terminology, cloud versus SaaS, and in terms of the audience that I survey, which is probably about 60% line of business and about 40% IT, many of those people don't really understand the difference between SaaS and hosted by their ERP vendor. Good example of that would be, or some proof of that is, I survey some people that I know are running a SaaS solution because that's the only way you can purchase and run. To the percentage that will consider traditional licensed on-premise solutions. From 2011 to 2013, again, about an 18-month time difference, that dropped off a cliff. The percentage that will actually consider an on-premise solution where you're responsible for buying and maintaining and servicing the hardware has dropped very significantly. The numbers, the percentages you're looking at here were only manufacturers. And I will tell you that the percentage of interest in SaaS versus on-premise, manufacturers lead the way. A lot of people sort of accuse manufacturing of being laggards in terms of technology. First of all, I don't necessarily believe that. Manufacturers may have lagged a little in terms of back office systems and making use of ERP for back office systems, but I will tell you that I believe the reason is, given a capital budget, most manufacturing managers would prefer to spend that money on the next piece of equipment or automation that's going to help them make more product and ship it out the door, not necessarily on a back office system that they may view as overhead, even if it's very important infrastructural kind of overhead. And my data shows that manufacturers in this case will probably lead the way into these cloud services and SaaS. So what are some steps that you can consider if in fact you do need to make a move and making a move to cloud or SaaS? First of all, I will tell you that lift and shift, just taking exactly what you're doing now and moving it to the cloud, is kind of unlikely. Now, there are vendors out there whose solutions run on-premise and also run in the cloud. But quite frankly, if all you're going to do is lift and shift and move from one deployment option to another, you're not going to gain all that much value. And there are some steps to doing this, so I would question whether it's really worth it to do that. So if you're not going to lift and shift and you're going to go to a new solution, you need to understand what all the options are. It will cost you in terms of probably money, definitely resources and your own time and effort, and therefore you're going to have to cost justify the return and actually estimate the return on that investment, and you will need to commit resources to doing it. So where and how can you cost justify? Well, these numbers come from, again, my 2013 ERP solution study. As part of that study, I actually benchmarked the performance of an ERP implementation. So I have a category called World Class. Now, this isn't necessarily a world-class company because I know different people define world-class companies in different ways. This, for me, is a world-class ERP implementation, and I determine world-class ERP implementation based on, A, the results that it has produced since you've implemented it, the progress you've made against your goals as an individual company, and also I temper that with some current performance, with some universal metrics. These are cost savings, and the way the question was asked was, how much, for example, have you reduced your operating cost, administrative cost, inventory costs since implementing ERP? I'd like to say, or I'd like to think it's as a result of ERP, but let's face it, any savings like this is going to be a result of a combination of people, process, and technology. The implementation of the ERP is the stake in the ground against which you measure, and quite frankly, I find too few people actually measure that, but I'm here to tell you that you should, or you will leave money and you'll leave savings on the table. In this case, you'll see reduction in operating costs, 22% versus world class, 21% of administrative costs, 20% of inventory costs, and included in that is 22% reduction in obsolete inventory. Those are huge savings. Think about it. If this world-class ERP company had $1 million worth of inventory and they reduced it by 20%, $200,000 right off the bat in terms of savings. That alone could pay for the most, if not all, of the upfront costs, depending on how big your installation is. But maybe you're not world-class. World-class in this case for 2013 was the top 20%. Even if you're in the all other category, 10, 8, 9, and 9% improvements or savings, those are very significant. But I will also point out these are savings that hit the bottom line. What about something that can impact your top line, that help you sell more product, perhaps satisfy your customers better, improve your business from an outward customer-facing standpoint? So I also take into account these other kinds of improvement, including improvements in complete and on-time shipment, customer retention, which is usually reflective of customer satisfaction. In order to do that, you may have to reduce your cycle times. The time it takes you from taking an order to shipping a product, you may have to increase production. Usually that increased production, if it's not necessarily indicative of increased in capital equipment, etc., it could be for better transparency, better scheduling, etc. So cycling back to how cloud can help, one of the things, now this data is actually from a different study than our ERP solution study. It was from a study called, I like to call Understanding SaaS. I was convinced prior to launching this study at the end of 2012 that there was still a lot of confusion in terms of understanding the different terminology and what different deployment options could actually deliver. And I proved myself right in that case, in that a lot of people still don't understand the difference. But what I asked companies to do after I defined what I meant by SaaS, which is software delivered as a service, to stack rank these 5 different potential benefits, from most important to least important. So 5 was most important and 1 was least important, and they had to sequence them. So the number across the top is the mean and allows me to order them. The actual number there is kind of meaningless except in the relative importance of these 5 different potential benefits of SaaS. At the top of the list were cost factors. Now, the survey went on to dive a little deeper into that, but the cost factors were generally upfront startup costs, lower total cost of inventory, total cost of ownership, the less hardware cost, maintenance costs, potentially lower cost of IT staffs, and also the cost and effort of upgrades, which was the second aspect, most important aspect. Anyone that's managing an ERP solution today knows that there's potential cost and effort and potential disruption in terms of moving from one release to the next. And often that gets delayed, and that delays your ability to consume innovation, etc. So that's the second one. It eliminates a lot of that disruption, and I just want to make one note about the term disruption, because you'll hear a lot of my counterparts, my competitors, so to speak, industry influencers, that talk about disruption as a good thing because they're talking about disruptive technology. Disruptive technology is good in that it forces you to change something to improve it. Disruption to your business is bad. And typically that's the kind of disruption that has been associated with upgrade issues. It costs your business in terms of disruption. By using a SaaS solution, you're relieved of a lot of that burden of the upgrade process. And if your SaaS solution provider is smart, they will deliver all of the new innovation in a very opt-in way. And by doing that, you can decide when to turn it on and when not to. So your system can be upgraded in the background overnight or whatever without your users even knowing about it and being disrupted, and you decide when you want to turn those new features and make use of that innovation. The third area where it can be extremely important is in the support of a distributed environment. This could be one of two things. One is you may have remote employees, and who doesn't today? Even if they go into the office every day, they're also accessing your systems overnight or when they're on vacation or some other time. Also, as you expand geographically, it's much easier to maintain standards and also enter areas where you may not have staff, and it may be difficult to recruit staff or put that kind of IT and administrative support on site. And then finally, there's the no hardware purchases required, and don't forget about the ongoing maintenance of that hardware. And then finally, less IT staff required. Let's face it, a small to mid-sized manufacturer may not be the dream job of top IT talent, so you may have difficulty recruiting and retaining good talent. If you have already retained that talent, then we're not talking about getting rid of those people. We're talking about letting them serve a more strategic purpose than the care and feeding of your ERP solution and the hardware. So in summary, I think everyone agrees that the times are changing and manufacturers must change with the times in order to maintain a competitive edge. Most of you are capital constrained, so keeping up with the times, changing and adding new quite frankly, you want to add new capacity in terms of manufacturing facility, not necessarily more computing capacity to serve the back office. From a competitive standpoint, you not only need to compete on price, delivery, and quality, the three areas that have always been the case, but you also need to compete on connectivity and collaboration today, which is an entirely different animal. So cloud can definitely help. Cloud ERP can be had at lower cost, lower startup cost, potentially lower total cost of ownership, particularly if you count the hardware and the maintenance cost. It guarantees, based on the very nature of software as a service, that you have easier access and you can access it at any time from anywhere. This makes it easier for you to connect your top-level executives on a more routine basis as opposed to an exceptional basis, and provide them with that level of easy access anytime, anywhere. Gone are the days when you could afford for someone to say, oh, I can't get onto ERP. I don't have time to figure that out. You need to address that both from an accessibility standpoint and also ways of engaging with ERP. Cloud can give you better access to upgrades. You won't be allowed to get too far behind in terms of the underlying upgrade release level, and also provides you an easier way of expanding your footprint into those new areas that may have been historically underserved, easier provisioning to actually add new functionality that's available from the same ERP vendor. What this allows you to do is more with less and to keep up with the times. With that, I will turn it over to Patrick.
Thanks, Cindy. Always great to hear what you're bringing to the table. It's very interesting research. And I'm Patrick Fetterman from Plex Systems. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the cloud today, Cloud ERP in particular, the trends we're seeing in that adoption rate within the Cloud ERP industry, and a little bit about our customers and the way they're using the cloud to drive innovation in their core businesses. I think everyone's aware of the incredible transformation that's taken place in the enterprise software market over the last 7 or 8 years. We've seen cloud have just an enormous impact on how software is delivered. It started, of course, with Salesforce.com. They're the classic example, and they really drove the need within a sub-segment within a company. So vertical applications, departmental level applications within companies, starting in sales and marketing, eventually customer service with the cloud, HR, payroll, the broader human capital management suites have gone to the cloud as well. And finance went to the cloud as soon as people felt very comfortable with the security aspects of it. The big question now, beyond the departmental level application, is what's next? What is the cloud going to impact next? And I think it's obvious for Plex that the answer is manufacturing. Both process and discrete manufacturing are having their businesses transformed by the cloud. Cindy talked a little bit about how that's happening, why it's happening, and I'm going to give you some examples of that here today as well. The graph you see is a representation of the major shifts in the ERP market over the last 30 plus years. It's very interesting to me that we've been seeing a cycle about every 10 to 12 years in new major architectural platforms coming forth, going all the way back to the mini-computer revolution of the late 1980s. Through client-server, SOA, or service-oriented architecture, has been the platform of choice since the late 1990s. But we are clearly in a shift towards the cloud today. Now, I've added a couple of logos in here so you can kind of peg the dates of these shifts to other technology shifts as well. And I love going all the way back to the mini-computer revolution and showing the Wang logo. Some of my younger colleagues don't even recognize that logo. But the mini-computer revolution in the late 1980s made a huge impact on manufacturing overall. The really amazing thing to me is that in the last few years, we have replaced, here at Plex, we've replaced one mini-computer-based system running on a Wang platform. It's a little bit shocking since that company disappeared almost 25 years ago. And another one running on a DEC VAX, a VAX-based mini-computer from Digital Equipment Corporation, again, a company that disappeared more than 20 years ago. And that's really an interesting challenge as we look at the waves of technology. It's the mismatch between how long a system lasts within an organization and how often new technology platforms come along. The challenge for companies is that ERP systems, these lengthy implementation cycles and major investments for companies, are 20-year investments. Maybe they're not envisioned as 20-year investments up front when the projects are first created, the systems are first deployed, but it is not uncommon to see 15, 18, 20-year-old systems still in place at manufacturing companies. Now, as I mentioned, the technology cycles run about every 10 years, so in the typical lifespan of an ERP solution, you'll miss 2 generations or sometimes even 3 generations of new technology, as exemplified by those companies running Wang and DEC VAX-based systems. Now, the challenge for companies, the problem that they face is if you deploy a system, by the time the next generation of technology comes along, your technology is so far behind, the new generation sucks up all the momentum, all the energy, the development resources, all the market research, everything, and the system you have, the predecessor here, is left behind. And you get diminishing return, diminishing investment, diminishing value out of your system over time. What that means is that buying a new ERP solution and implementing it, when you're in the middle of one of those 10 to 12 year spans, That's fairly easy. Most everybody's buying the same generation of technology, the same architectural platform. So it's a relatively easy decision. You still need to choose which company you're going to partner with, but the platform or architectural decision is an easy one. However, when you're in or near the overlap between two technologies, it's a huge challenge for companies. It represents really both a risk. Making the wrong decision can put you a full generation behind before you're done implementing. Of course, the corollary there is that new technology can bring its own risks as well. But there is also an opportunity for companies to get a generation ahead of their competitors and start using a newer technology, a newer architecture to gain distinct business advantages. And that's really where we are today. We are in that overlap period today where the on-premise service-oriented architecture-based ERP solution, that architecture has come to the end of its life cycle. And I have to say, over the platform changes over the last 30 years or so, the SOA-based architecture has probably been the least adopted. It's one of the reasons we're still seeing companies running systems that are pre-Y2K, in some cases pre-client server. The SOA-based architecture just didn't drive enough value for companies to make the major changes and major decisions, major business impacting decisions to replace their existing systems. So that's becoming passe very, very quickly. And cloud ERP, as Cindy described it, is emerging very, very rapidly. We're seeing, here at Plex, we're seeing tremendous growth as a company, but we're seeing tremendous growth among the cloud overall in the manufacturing space. As I mentioned, the advantages of the service-oriented architecture were a little too abstract for many companies. They were IT advantages in many cases, not business advantages. And what we're seeing in the adoption of the cloud ERP solution on this platform is that it's being driven by business advantages that this architectural model brings. Cindy did talk about some of these and gave good explanations. Cost is definitely a driver for many companies, especially in the smaller end of the market. It allows them to get access to a world-class system, the same type of solution that much larger organizations might deploy at a fraction of the cost that they would normally see. It's also a lower capital investment. In many cases, there's very little capital investment. It's strictly an operating cost that they pay on a monthly, quarterly, or yearly basis. And the implementation tends to be cheaper and faster as well. And that's really what most people get right away when they think about enterprise software in the cloud, is the cost model changes so dramatically. And that's what drives a lot of people to become interested in it in the first place. Over time, however, we see our customers and adopters of the cloud seeing other advantages as well. Part of it is a business agility. As I mentioned, the implementation speed generally goes way, way up. So instead of spending a couple of months at the beginning of that cycle acquiring the hardware required, accounts can get turned on immediately upon contract signing. Now, there's still an implementation cycle that needs to be undertaken, and that is mapping the core functions of the software to the core business processes of the new company using the software. But it's generally a much, much faster process, weeks and months instead of months and years. The other forms of agility that people gain from this is scalability, both scaling up as their business grows or scaling down. We had many companies that were on our system during the downturn of 2008, 2009 that had invested in the system as if they were going to grow 25, 30% year over year. Instead, the business declined and they negotiated with us, so they only paid for what they were using. It's a common scenario in the cloud model, both scaling up and scaling down as required. And the system is highly configurable, so customers are making changes in their configuration on a daily basis, on a weekly basis, to better match their ever-changing business processes. Now, going along with that, this innovation cycle that comes with the cloud is really extraordinary. Cindy talked about it a little bit in our development model, the opt-in enhancements that we deploy But this is truly unique. It's something that cannot be done in an on-premise architecture. But in our world, because we control the software environment, we control the hardware environment, we control the data center where everything is hosted from, the speed of new feature enhancement, new functionality enhancement and deployment is greatly accelerated. In fact, we see minor enhancements, literally dozens of minor enhancements being deployed every day. So instead of waiting for those big periodic upgrades on a quarterly or annual basis with a major reimplementation process required, our customers are getting new features every day. Now, as Cindy described it, it is an opt-in enhancement. So we surround these enhancements with configuration settings. So the software hasn't changed when you come in the morning, but when you go looking for a new feature, you can turn it on in a test environment, give it a try, see if it works, potentially enhance it with Plex for unique requirements that you might have, and then start using it in your production environment. This is a completely cloud-native advantage that you cannot get in any other architecture today. And so we get RFPs every once in a while asking us, what percentage of your customers are on the latest version of your software? It's always an important question to ask when you're looking at enterprise software, but we kind of chuckle with that because our answer is all of them. All of this stuff, the cost advantages, the business agility, the continuous innovation cycle lead to really greater value for our customers. We see a broader user adoption across the entire company, and I'm going to talk in a minute about our licensing model and how that helps user adoption. Anywhere, anytime access off of any internet-connected device, and yet we've got world-class security backing this all up. So in the end, our customers implement faster, get to use it faster. A broader section of their employees, customers, and suppliers are using it, and they get greater value out of the system itself. Now, Cindy made an excellent point earlier in her discussion about the perception of manufacturers sometimes being laggards in new technology adoption. We've seen that misperception in many market researchers and in many news stories about the industry. Our take on that is a little bit different. In fact, we find that manufacturers use technology more readily and more thoroughly than virtually any other industry that I've ever been involved in. In fact, manufacturers' businesses are entirely dependent on technology in different forms. Because of that, their requirements for technology are so robust and so complex that they're loath to bet their business on new technology, assuming that it's immature or incomplete. That's a huge risk for our manufacturers, and we at Plex understand that. We get it, and we would not ask our customers to bet their businesses on immature or incomplete solutions either. It would be a big red flag for any one of them. The thing I'd like to communicate to you today is that that risk really disappears with Plex. I know this is an eye chart slide. I don't expect that people can read the details on it. All I want to show you is that it is a full-fledged manufacturing ERP solution. Everything from production scheduling, shop floor management, quality management, inventory management, and barcoding, up to the top floor, HR, global financials, and everything that a manufacturer needs to run their business. Cloud ERP for manufacturers is today a mature and complete solution with the Plex Manufacturing Cloud. This is a slightly different representation of the software architecture, and I like to put this up because it has three different constituencies on here, and each one of these groups are active users of the software. You'll see at the bottom the plants, the factories that utilize the Plex Manufacturing Cloud. On the right-hand side, we represent customers, and on the left-hand side are suppliers. The reason we put them up there is that we have this unique licensing model. Because we don't sell on a per-user basis as the legacy license-based software systems do, we encourage people to set up logins for their customers and for their suppliers as well as all their employees. The reason for this is that the more people using the system, the more accurate the data, the more up-to-date the data, and the more valuable the system is to you. So you get better analysis, better reports. Your customers can log on. Of course, you can control what they can see, but they can log on and automatically get the status of their orders. Your suppliers can log on and see the corrective actions that you've issued them. They can see the new orders for replenishment that you've issued them, all within a seamless system. And so this unique licensing model, again, is empowered by the cloud. It would be very difficult and very expensive to do this in an on-premise system design or with the legacy licensing model. In Plex's site license or company-wide license model, we encourage you to have as many users as required, as you might need, simply to get the most value out of the system. I'd like to take a moment just to tell you a little bit more about Plex. We are a cloud-native solution. We've been in the cloud for many, many years. It's really all we do. We are cloud-native and we are manufacturing native. We built what is now the first manufacturing cloud. We started on the shop floor controlling production, recording inventory, and our fundamental philosophy is that if you control and record that data, you get 90% of the valuable transactions that happen within a manufacturing enterprise. Once you have that data, building strong global financials is an easy outcome. It's an easy exercise for us. And again, we are a Midwest-based company. We live in the heart of manufacturing country here, and many of our employees are manufacturers just like the people listening to this call today. I will talk a little bit about our customer base as well, but we come from an automotive background and have expanded into other quality-driven and high liability industries as our core functions. Plex has several hundred companies utilizing the Plex Manufacturing Cloud in a variety of industries, although most of them are concentrated in a smaller handful. We focus on providing solutions for broadly the motor vehicles industry, including cars, trucks, and specialty vehicles, for aerospace and defense, and for food and beverage processors. So you'll see each of them represented here. Companies in the automotive supply chain like Doka and Gibbs, companies in the heavy industry supply chain like Caterpillar, an OEM there, of course. Companies in aerospace and defense. Icon is a very interesting aircraft company. And my new favorite customer this last year, Jenny's Splendid Ice Cream, which makes some of the best high-quality gourmet ice cream you'll find in North America. All of them are running their entire operations within their plants on Plex. In many cases, the companies are running their entire operations. Yapco is a good-sized automotive supplier with between half a dozen and a dozen plants around the world, running their entire global organization on the Plex Manufacturing Cloud, for example. And they are not early adopters. These are people that have seen the advantages that the cloud brings and are moving forward with it because of the distinct business advantages that the cloud offers them. We are very proud of our customer base. We live with many of these people right down the road, and they are really driving us forward into success today. And that is our story here at Plex. I want to thank everybody for coming today. I hope you found this information valuable. Cindy and I are now going to stick around for the next.
Hello, this is Pat Wawrzyniak joining you again. We've received some questions, and it would be nice to get to all of them before our time is up. Jim Shepard, Plex Vice President for Corporate Strategy, will be joining us with Cindy to take questions. The first question is, how would you address the issue of risk with respect to data security, loss of data, and cloud downtime?
Well, that's a good question, and in fact, I could talk for days on the issue of security. But in the interest of being brief, I will say if you tell me that you're concerned about security in terms of a SaaS ERP, I would say that that's correct. You should be concerned about security. However, I would also say that even if you're running an on-premise solution, you should also be concerned about security. If you are, if you have a completely closed system, if nobody can get in through a VPN connection, if nobody can bring their laptop home, connect to another network, and bring it back in and connect to yours, if you have no other outside connections, then you're a lot safer. But nobody has those situations anymore. And quite frankly, if you're a mid-sized manufacturer, chances are you don't have the kind of IT security expertise on staff that these well-respected cloud solution providers have on staff. When it comes to downtime or loss of data, these are contractual issues that you can negotiate into your contract, and in doing that, service level agreement, contractual agreements, then I would also ask the supplier that you're negotiating with to provide you with some good statistical data about their track record. And any good SaaS provider should be able to provide that to you. And quite frankly, in terms of business continuity and disaster recovery, if you're a manufacturer and you have systems that are critical, you may be a lot better off putting them in a SaaS solution.
Yeah, Cindy, I think that's right. I mean, what we say to people all the time is that we are happy to have them compare our capabilities and our track record for uptime and physical security and backup capability and data security against their in-house IT organization. We simply have resources that a typical manufacturer can't afford to have in terms of full-time architects and security experts and the physical security and the multiple redundancies and a live hot backup site and so forth. Those would just be prohibitively expensive for an individual company, but we're able to spread the cost over our hundreds of clients, and so I think this is actually a much more secure and reliable environment than an in-house on-premise system.
Two quick questions about Plex in general. Can it support process manufacturing, and does it have multilingual and multi-currency capabilities?
Yeah, I'll take that. The answers to all three of those are yes. Plex supports both process and discrete manufacturing. We have a number of customers in the food and beverage industry who use our batch process and recipe functionality. We're continuing to expand that. And we support our customers in, I think, more than 20 locations. I can't remember quite how many languages the product is in, and it has always been a multi-currency application.
How is SaaS ERP any less expensive? If you continue to pay for it month to month, isn't there a point where you reach break even?
Let me take that. I think that that's for naysayers or quite frankly vendors that don't provide a SaaS solution. A lot of times that will be the argument they make. There's a lot of different ways I can answer that, but the simplest way I can is that think about hardware and ongoing maintenance cost of that hardware. If you can remove that from the equation, then you've got a savings right then and there. What's interesting is, people that are considering moving to SaaS cite cost issues, but the folks that are already running SaaS in my studies see some of the savings there in terms of not having to build more IT resources than they already have, not having to purchase and maintain hardware as being priceless. So, and the other thing to consider too is even if you buy an on-premise solution and pay for it up front, if you're smart, you continue to pay for maintenance because that's how you get continued support and that's how you get continued innovation. So you continue to pay month to month even with an on-premise solution. And I would say if you factor in all of those, chances are you're going to come out on the plus side in terms of cost savings in a SaaS solution.
How about Plex meeting the local government requirement from China in finance functions?
We have a number of customers with plants in China, as you would expect, being 100% manufacturing focused and manufacturing being a global industry. We have a lot of customers who have plants in China. We have not at this point built a set of local Chinese financials for Plex. Our customers are using local Chinese software companies to provide those financials and integrating it to Plex. We're currently looking at the two alternatives to decide what our direction is going forward, whether we will write native Chinese financials ourselves as a part of the Plex system or whether we will partner with a third-party company. We haven't made that decision yet, but we'll be making it shortly.
Okay, here's one from a very small custom manufacturer with 8 to 10 employees. Would that software benefit us?
I think it depends on your, on your growth rate. It would certainly benefit you. That's the very lower edge of the market that we serve. The vast majority of our customers will be larger than that. It is a product that scales down very well in terms of your ability to turn off functionality that you don't need yet, and the pricing scales well as well. But I think we would have to talk to you individually about whether or not Plex is appropriate or that it might be overkill for a business that size. And I think a lot of it depends on what the growth plans are for the business.
I might want to add one more plant of seed in there as well. It's not so much as justifying it with the number of employees that you have as look at how complex your business is. If you're manufacturing very complex kind of product or your business is growing in complexity because of supply chain issues, and perhaps you're outsourcing some of your manufacturing to keep some of that headcount low, then you may need it all that much more likely to need it than not.
Okay, one last question. Could you share some thoughts on the impact of cloud on product design and manufacturing instead of the ERP aspect?
Well, I think one of the things to keep in mind on both the design and manufacturing areas is that the manufacturing industry has changed dramatically, and it is now very much a global business where many, and in some cases most of the activities that you have to try and manage and control and coordinate occur outside the four walls of your business. You have design partners, you have vendors for components and raw materials, you have contractors doing assembly activities, and obviously customers and resellers and distributors and so forth scattered all over the world. And one of the things about a cloud solution is this access from anywhere. The fact that anybody in that extended network, that's involved in the design, the production, the delivery, the service of your system can get in. If they have an internet connection, they can get in 7/24. And it makes a dramatic difference in your ability to use a cloud ERP system to manage and coordinate that activity.
Unfortunately, our time is almost up. All unanswered questions will be passed along to our presenters, and you can expect a reply by email. The entire webinar is available for replay by 3:30 Eastern Daylight Time, and you can access it by using the same sign-in link used today. As Cindy and Patrick demonstrated, ERP software plays a key role in reducing manufacturing costs, improving data-driven decision-making, and increasing supplier collaboration. SME and Manufacturing Engineering Media have a host of ways by which you can keep in touch with the latest developments in software technologies, including the April issue of Manufacturing Engineering includes an article on digital manufacturing. Our July issue will feature an article on manufacturing software. SME will hold the Big M, a new exhibition that will be held with SME's Rapid Additive Manufacturing 3D Imaging Show on June 9th through 12th at the Cobo Center in Detroit. The Big M is devoted to answering the big questions about the future of manufacturing. It's focused on the entire manufacturing process, from design to production to quality to sustainability and much more. Thanks for joining us for this Manufacturing Engineering Media webinar. We hope you found it informative.